All right, thanks, Caitlin. Good to be here again. So I want to welcome our three partner panelists to the discussion today. So we've got Pete Schultz with Applied Tech, Stephen Tracy with NTech, and Neil Hawkins with Lanier. So we'll go around and do quick intros. I'm the co-founder and have been here for a long time and CTO. Some quick fun facts. I also went to Purdue just like Tim, but I have to admit that I don't think I ever put my foot in the Boilermaker Stadium. So I don't watch professional sports very much, but then I like to be out on my bike, road bike or mountain bike, or doing other things. And then piano is also a fun hobby. So why don't we have Neil, Stephen, and Pete introduce themselves?
Great. Along with the Tim, I am a Purdue graduate, so I'm a big fan of Purdue. Run an organization out of Los Angeles, based out of Los Angeles by the name of Lanier Group. I've been in business for a little over 17 years. Our new focus, effective about 5-6 years ago, has been complete MRR, focusing on compute, cloud, security, data protection, and management of services. We're just under, we're right around that 40 to 50 user mark on our staff member base, and we do focus. We have offices in LA, across the Midwest, and Texas.
Awesome. I'm not a Purdue fan, so we'll start there. No, Pete Schultz, COO of Applied Tech, based out of Wisconsin. I've been with the organization for about 10 years. We are, pure play MSP, like Neil kind of mentioned, focus on, all MRR as best as we can. I've been with the organization, like I said, for about 10 years in all different operational roles. We've had a big focus lately on scaling the business via mergers and acquisitions, and I'm happy to talk about that in the future as well. But I guess we're about 150 team members strong at this point, and to Neil's point, we are throughout the Midwest, primarily in Wisconsin and Denver, Colorado, and in the greater Colorado mountain area as well.
And I'm Stephen Tracy. I'm the VP of Service Operations at NTech. We're at MSP primarily along the Gulf Coast of Florida, which makes BCDR very important in our neck of the woods with hurricanes. And I've been with the organization about 9 years and filled a variety of technical and operational roles. So I love to talk about how tech and operations work together.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for all the introductions, everyone. So the topic of the panel today is how automation can enable small businesses to scale up. And so just want to mention real quick, what is a small business? Jim Dubois, who's our executive chairman on the board, he was a CIO of Microsoft for a long time. And the problems they faced at Microsoft, they had tens of thousands of employees or more, right? And so that's truly a large business. So I think all of us can say, hey, we're a small business compared to somebody like Microsoft. And so anyways, I think we're all at different levels of scale, whether we're starting out with one person or you've got hundreds of people or even thousands as an MSP. And so we're going to talk about automation, which has been the theme today. And I thought we'd just kick it off with by saying, it's everyone's favorite topic that we could spend 30 minutes of manual labor to do something, or we could spend 6 to 60 hours to go automate it. So that's definitely me. It's sometimes you don't pick your battles well when you choose what to automate. And so as a first intro question, let's just talk about what is automation, how do we define it, and why should we automate?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think from our perspective, we define automation as, like non-human interaction with the task, right? So, can we set up a process to run, do something, produce something, and not necessarily have to have, person in chair to get it done, and really looking to do that in a way that minimizes risk to the business. So areas where, things get, mistakes happen a lot is a great area to look for automation to help reduce those risks and minimize the work that has to get redone in the future.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's not just about saving labor for you, Pete, but it's about reproducibility, consistency, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think a lot of people think about like the automation of like technical tasks, like spinning up new users or setting up desktops or whatever it may be. We also look at it from like automating of reporting, like how can we generate the right reports with the right data, get it into the right people's hands, do all of those things, and look at it from a business wide perspective of automation, and not necessarily just the how do we get from point A to point B on the ticket.
So how do we know, when to automate, like that joke that we started out with? If we just automated everything, our businesses would probably not be profitable. We'd be distracted, shiny object syndrome. So how do we know when is the right time to automate something?
I think it's what Pete was talking about. It's not just related to technology. A lot of times people think of, well, it's a task that I don't want to do, or that isn't worth my time or resources. But I think it's anytime you want something done consistently. So just like artificial intelligence is making waves in the world right now, it's human error is a real thing. And so think of a new user setup or a report that you want to generate. You want it done consistently, right? And there's nothing better than automation to do that.
I would
Yes,
say, to add to that, as much as it involves technology, we find out it involves a lot of policy and process. So if you don't have your policy set up to begin with, the automation becomes nothing. So some of our automation I would consider done more along human hands, but it's automation of policy and process than it is the technical side, which we find helps build the right foundation for growth and eliminate some of the issues or eroding margins at that point.
that leads into a good kind of next topic, which is, what are the prerequisites for automation? You mentioned for you, Neil, that you need policy and process in place and so, how has that helped, why is that so important?
Oh, a couple things. When you don't have the policy, unfortunately, for several years of our business, you don't have the policy set up, and you're constantly in reactive mode. You're responding differently to each type of task that comes across. So when you build that policy and the process behind it, you then start to realize what is the best process for this type of response. So when something comes into the system, this is the input in the system, this is the desired output. It helps quite a bit when you start building the automation around that policy. Without it, you end up having several different types of responses or outputs for each input, which causes pain.
Yeah, I was going to layer on top of that, making sure that the documented process is solid before you try to automate it, because if you don't have that solid foundation, any errors in that process are going to just be repeated at magnitude with automation. So if you missed a step, or grabbing bad data or bad inputs, as Neil mentioned, right? Like all of those things will just exponentially get worse. So making sure that your process is well defined and bulletproof before you try to automate, it's a big part of the success of it.
And in terms of these, kind of mapping customer promises to things that you automate, is there kind of a natural order of, verifying compliance versus implementing these promises versus auditing? There's monitoring, implementation, compliance. And so where do you think about when you have a process and then you think about automation, where do you begin, or is it process dependent?
I think from our side, it's twofold, Kevin. So it's does it serve the promises made to our clients, right? We're in the business of IT and need to make money in IT. So if we're chasing automation for the sake of, chasing the shiny object, like we can do very easily, it distracts us from taking care of the client and putting them at the center of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's a big piece of just making sure that we're meeting those things. But then from the scalability of automation, making sure that we're looking at opportunities that we could, potentially elevate the entire client base that we're supporting. So, inside of our business, we're looking at vulnerability remediation and automation there. If we can look at a client that went through a vulnerability scan and we detect something, can we build an automated remediation for the low impact changes? And if we can we then roll it out to 400 customers if it's low impact, and raise the collective level of security across all of them with that effort? So those are two different ways that we look at it.
Yeah, I think that's good. I agree with that, Pete. I think too many times in this industry, we end up chasing the new shiny object, whether it be a product or an automation task, and you find yourself, Kevin, going back to what you said before, it's like you spend $60,000 trying to create an automated process to save yourself 3,000, and it something breaks down the road. The other thing we find pretty interesting when it comes to compliance, process, application, whatever it be we're using, is usually outside of this industry, you build policy and you create the tools around the policy to wrap around it, and that doesn't work real well. We found just you got to look at the tools you're using, look at the compliance traits that are wrapped around the tools, and then determine how the tool works to be able to get the policy working the way you need it. It's a little backwards in this case. Otherwise, you're finding yourself customizing every little automation task. And the moment that application or that quote tool changes, you end up having to redevelop that automation task or stitch all over again. So that's one thing we have. It's not one fold. You have to look at the applications and the tools you're using. You have to look at the policy and the process. You have to look at compliance across the board. Those are three big buckets that we have to look at when we go through our process on our side.
I think it's interesting though that we keep talking about policy and procedure and when to know to automate something. At the end of the day, we're a customer service business, and we're people in the business of serving people. So to your point about trying to map out the promises that we make to our clients, it's not always a compliance issue or a technical issue. Sometimes it's the promises that we're making to our clients are that they're going to get speedy resolutions to their issues, they're going to get a great experience, and if automation helps you to accomplish that, then it's great. If it turns into something where it's a cold, unfeeling, robotic process and they're not talking to other people, some customers might not want that. So it's about understanding your customer and finding opportunities to automate that either helps them accomplish their goals, helps you accomplish your goals, or ideally fulfills both, which most people, they have it down to how much time being down costs them, or what the impact on their business is if they have an incident or things like that. So if you can say, hey, we're automating all these things for you and here's the ROI, it's also talking to your customers about that, not turning into something where it's just you're just a handful of tools in the background and not people.
Stephen, I think that idea of knowing what your customer wants and the type of customer that you're serving and your customer experience is so crucial, because in the same industry, highly successful MSPs can take a completely different approach. One might try to automate everything and get customers who like that, and others might go after the personal touch, the white glove human experience, and find clients who value that and pay for that. And so there's no right answer necessarily to that, other than know your customers and the brand promise that you have and the experience you're delivering. So I think that's a really fundamental concept.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, everyone wants to make more money, and sometimes automation can accomplish that by having a lower cost of labor. But I think Topher was just saying it previously, and it's something that rings true. Ultimately, the goal should be to move people into positions that leverage their natural talents and not have them sitting there pushing buttons and doing highly administrative tasks that could be automated. So ideally, you're being able to spend more time interfacing with your customers and talking about their businesses, and the automation that you can accomplish allows for that rather than just allows for you cutting headcount or automating compliance so you sleep better at night, or other tangible things.
So I'm gonna go off the reservation and ask a bit of an unscripted question, and we'll see if all of you plead the fifth or not. But the basis is you're all highly successful MSPs that are mature, and so this is not in doubt. But to give the audience some perspective, if you had to say, to what degree are your promises to your customers covered by policies or processes at this point in your business, and then to what degree are those things automated in your business? If you just had to roughly guess intuitively, how far along are you with covering all of those things with policy and process and then automation?
I guess I'll be the first to fall on the sword. I would say on the first part of that question, probably 85%. And I apologize for any of the salespeople that are listening, but we know there's promises out there that are made that we have to try to do the best we can with. On the automation against those, I would say we're still learning. We're probably more in the 10 to 15% range where there's a lot of opportunity in the business community to do that. So I wouldn't say we're nearly, even as a more mature organization, nearly close to 100% on either one.
I'd follow up on that. We're probably the same. I think the one thing we've learned over all these years is as policy came, and Stephen, this goes back to something you said, which I appreciate. We learned to respond to the SLA. We learned to make sure we were hitting the metrics, and we missed the CSAT, the customer service side. Each customer is different. You can't weigh them the same. It's very difficult to get every customer in the same type of bucket. There is a perception from the client that doesn't always equate to the SLA clock per se. So things get messed up in that area. So I think that's one area we are really learning. The automation side compared to, I think we're right on the beginning of doing something what could be great, but that fine balance of building policy and procedure to align it with good customer service and then tie the automation to it. I would say we're on the learning, just on the lower learning curve of getting the automation tied into all that, how it works. There is policy, but we've learned through headache and a lot of pain that we missed the service side, or the customer service side, and that's where we're going back through the gate. So our goal for the last part of this year and next year is stewardship of our agreements. Does it align with our mission, vision, value statement? Are we really providing what we call our linear dirt philosophy, which I can get into another time or respond to anybody later? Getting that mature organization, that service approach, good customer service approach, so they want to refer us to their next person they come in contact with. Very difficult.
Excellent.
Yeah, man, I don't know how to quantify that, Kevin, but now you've got me thinking of, one of the things that we try to do with data is to be able to answer that confidently and say, we are meeting all of our SLAs, we're hitting all of our KPIs, and we're such a new industry relatively, that's still in its infancy in a lot of different areas, and there's just so much change that, even all of our customers aren't on the same contract. That's a big initiative that we're working on. Some of it's due to mergers and acquisitions. Some of it's due to, having legacy customers that we just haven't rocked the boat on. There's so many different reasons, but part of trying to get them all on the same contract and standardize on the same stack and, have the same deliverables and all these things is so that we can measure that and not be managing to the exception and have all these one-off things all over the place. And that helps with automation. That helps with confidently being able to answer a question like you just asked and say 100% of the time or 90% of the time. So I think you have to build to where you feel that you're achieving all those things, and that's what we're really focused on, is not having our growth take us away from what we got into this business for and what our kind of core mission is. And I see that happen a lot of times. You talk about the definition of a small business, like, growth is really challenging in a small business. And so you can stray away from some of those things and leave a trail of mess behind you if you're not measuring those kind of things and ideally automating a lot of it.
Well, thank you all for your transparency and sharing those things. So I think this leads in well into the next theme, which is just, how do we automate? And I'm thinking more of the business organization. How are your businesses organized to identify opportunities for automation and to actually direct the work of automation? So who's deciding what should be automated, who's doing the work of what should be automated, and maybe as your businesses are now, and then we'll get into, well, how did that evolve as you grew up and scaled up? But just from a practical point of view, day to day, who is deciding who automates what, and then that it's actually done well and so forth. So how's that working?
I'll start, I guess, and keep in mind again, we are on the 150 employee side, so I think we have a little bit more bandwidth than some to do this, but we now have a platform and data insights team that's specific around making sure that as we grow and scale and acquire, that we are aligning what our tool stack is, that we're understanding how they talk together, how data flows through the system, and then they're the ones that are helping guide where automation should live and what type of automation should happen, so that we don't have a tier one tech using Chat GPT to try to do something and push it into the system and create issue and stuff like that, right? So for us, we've had to segment that from a data governance and access and other reasons, but yeah, we have a dedicated team at this point that's working towards that end.
We recently, we don't have 150 people to assign a platform team, but we've been successful in the recent, I'd say 2 to 3 years, and really defining more of what our managers do across the team. So we have deployment, onboarding, support managers, which then bring those ideas back to another individual that works above them to provide ideas on repetition. First of all, is there any repetitious event that takes place across the board that we could automate? Is there something that could tag customer service? Is there something that could tag a follow from another pattern? So those are the things we're doing now. The one thing we're learning, and it may go into what a little bit of what you said, Pete, is to develop really a tools management team, because this industry, a lot of the automation needs to come to the tools after the policy is built. And we find ourselves with 15, 16, 17 tools across to manage our customer base, whether it be from backups, whether it be to security, whether it be to different things that we've had to build out internally, and it gets really cumbersome every time one updates. What's the effect on the other? So automation really needs to come back to a tools management team. So we're developing it. We haven't started yet, but it's something that we came across about a quarter or so ago that we have to get done.
To Pete's point, our size and scale may not speak today to where we've been, but one of the things we did years ago was we had a tech that was particularly interested in automation and had a little bit of a development background and understood a little more about development than the average person, and understood the help desk and the IT side of the business. And so we put him into an automation engineer role, and I think that was one of the things that was a big leap for us, because you might not see the immediate ROI on a role like that, and most MSPs at a smaller size are just focused on how to grow and maybe have a handful of help desk techs and a couple of account managers and things like that. So I'd say, to your question, defining where it lives in the organization is the first step, not necessarily who's responsible for it, and then building a roadmap around it. And one of the things we also did was set up our tools in a way where we could have our techs easily identify things that could be automated. And we just had a kind of a culture of automation that we had to build around identifying it, even if it didn't get an immediate fix. And then tools and other things also help, depending on the decisions that you make, and how out of the box they are versus things that need a development resource on staff.
Excellent. So whether you're starting out with your first kind of dedicated role in automation like you were describing in the past, or you've got a whole platform team, or anything in between, how do y'all know if these efforts are successful? Who's accountable, and are you trying to map back automation initiatives to business metrics like OKRs or KPIs, or is it more qualitative? How are you measuring success of automation initiatives?
Yeah, I think for us it's two. One, it's a cost management type of situation. So Neil mentioned the amount of tools that a standard MSP probably has, and I look at that automation as the ability to, how do we narrow the tool stack down, and are there things that we can get out of certain tools with automation, or by combining what 2 or 3 tools do together in a different way to help reduce the overall COGS footprint to the team in the business. And then ultimately, one of the numbers that we look at every quarter is revenue by tech, and it's not necessarily from like a reduction in team standpoint as much as building capacity for growth. Because if we're doing our jobs right, hopefully we have the problem of not being able to hire people fast enough to keep up with the sales growth that we have. And really we look at, can we sustain higher revenue by tech with automation, and can we accept that next new client without having to hire that next new tech and things of that nature, and really look at it from a capacity expansion standpoint and not necessarily a payroll reduction standpoint.
Revenue by tech is the key one, while you maintain quality, of course, but sounds like that's a key business metric you're tying back to.
It's one of the easier ones that we found over the years to really measure the ROI. Like you could look at, your time per ticket, your time per endpoint, all of those things, but there's a lot of fluctuation that we found over the years that could affect those things. Like, hey, there's a 0-day thing, and now we have tons of time and tons of tickets in a given period because of we're chasing a 0-day, drop or something of that nature, where the revenue by tech seems to be pretty consistent, and your ability to kind of navigate that. And as you scale, you're only looking for a couple $100 per tech. You have 20 techs, a couple $100 a month, adds up to a couple thousand pretty easily. So that was one of the successful KPIs to measure this for us.
Yeah, revenue, I'd say revenue by tech, revenue by all staff too. It's interesting how much the administration staff can get bloated out pretty quickly if you're not careful with managing the tech, right? So, and especially on the automation side. So that's one thing. I think getting the metric, the key KPIs in order to see how all of them play into it, but that key one with revenue by tech, revenue by all staff helps us quite a bit. We also see sales metrics come back to see how days to close, how many days to close on an object as we get more efficient. We find out the onboarding becomes more efficient. We tend to be able to see how much time it takes to onboard through an automation stitch or whatnot, which we're able to reduce that is pretty significant, as well as on the deployment side.
I like the onboarding angle, yeah, where it's so critical that early phase. The faster customers see time to value, once they take that leap of faith to sign the contract, the happier they'll probably be. It sets them on a certain trajectory.
Yeah,
Steve, I saw you had something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think one of the things you can look at a wider ranging thing, like he was saying, tickets per endpoint, revenue by tech, but sometimes it's about the forecast of, if I bring on this tool, if I invest in this resource, what's the point in time? What was I doing at this point versus what am I doing now? So one of the early things that we did a lot of automation around was our setups of our new equipment. And so we were able to clearly say, hey, it used to take us 4 hours to set up this workstation. Now it takes us 30 minutes, and it's plugging in a flash drive and running a series of scripts rather than someone babysitting it. And so we were able to like clearly see the effect that had, rather than trying to map it across our entire team, our entire client base. So some of those specific projects or those specific initiatives, like if you bring on a new RMM tool or something like that, it's what was the investment, and then what are the KPIs, or what's the the return on that investment, and being able to forecast that out.
Excellent. So this is all really good in theory. Someone asked a good question. What are your automation goals for 2023 or 24? So as you just think back, what have been some of the big initiatives you've had either this year or next year? And can you measure the success of that in some tangible way?
Yeah, I think one of our big goals we already talked about was that the vulnerability remediation. A lot of the same types of vulnerabilities are found in a lot of different environments. And again, if we can, I don't necessarily want to automate the high impact ones, right? Because we could cause a lot of damage in a hurry if we did that. But our ability to remediate the low via automation, and then build that in so that the next time one of our sales team sells a new remediation vuln scan product or agreement or whatever it may be, we go in and check the boxes and remediate the things, or better yet, we've already remediated them, and the scan comes back clean, and we can show value that way as well. So our ability to maximize that security revenue in that way is one of the areas that we're trying to measure that automation right now and get more of the revenue kind of KPI out of that faster.
One of the so I won't pitch a specific product, but one of the products that we brought on recently is going to help us to automate things quicker. So one of the things we're focused on is building the roadmap and the list of projects and items that we want to automate. I think that's one of the biggest things when we talk about shiny objects. It's what are the specific items that you'll get the most bang for your buck on, or like what Pete was talking about, will provide less risk in the organization. And so we're really focused on the tools enabling us to do that. We were spending a lot of time having to tie different APIs together and just get it to the point that we could automate. And there's a lot of great vendors and tools out there now that make that process a little more seamless. So we really want to make it so that automation is not something that only a couple of people can do in the organization, but that it can be really leveraged more across the entire organization. And I want to be able to say, hey, here's a really cool thing, to our marketing team that you can automate because you don't have to be a developer. Hey, we brought on this new tool and we can automatically pull it into our documentation system. Like, just lots of things that have cost us a lot of time and energy and frustration in the past, and having a roadmap that we can measure the success or failure of those initiatives.
Yeah, I'd say ours is we got two goals really. One is to do more with less. I think that's one of the goals we always have to do, continue to do more with less, because the industry is pushing that way, especially with AI mechanisms coming up. The other thing is we also have a path to work on security remediation, vulnerability remediation. It's a big hit. We've spent an enormous amount of time this year on it. Security has been one of the top ticket producers in our organization across the board. So our goal is to find some way to do security remediation, vulnerability remediation. Also with the along with that stems from the automation side is the 0-day CVE threat management. So CVEs are in this industry are across the board. It seems like applications are being produced without true risk analysis, the proper QA process. So they get embedded into the field, the systems are updated, CVEs get launched, and that produces a whole line of remediation out. So finding a way to automate that process, or at least gather a more thorough process from the date that gets released, that CV gets released, to properly drop into our team for the products we support only. Because you look at the CV threat report, there are thousands of them that come across there on a weekly basis. Trying to capture the ones that are important, you drop them into vulnerability remediation immediately, so we can be proactive and do it not just for one client, but do that across the board for several clients.
It's a literal avalanche of CVEs and all of the different custom software that your clients might run. It's a near impossible task to sift through that manually. So we've got 7 minutes left. So controversial question, or not, but to AI or not to AI. AI is the buzzword, but where is AI's place for you in your organization today, just pragmatically? Are you using it in some way or not?
We're starting to explore it a bit more. We've made some investments in it with particular solutions and vendors and stuff. One of the things that we've come to find out, especially via the M&A kind of track that we have been on, it's only as good as the data is, and we're finding that with automation too, right? And so the two kind of tie together. We've actually paused a lot of our AI and some of our automation work right now while we go through the process of really mapping out the data journey that all of our stuff goes through, whether it's a config, whether it's a ticket or a phone call or whatever it may be, to really make sure that we have the right data, because similar to poorly written automation, if we're using AI to source the wrong data to our techs or to our clients or whatever it may be, we're just compounding the problems and not actually solving them. So we've actually taken a little bit of a step back and hit pause, and that's actually one of the things our platform team is working on as a priority in Q4 and Q1 is really the data aspect of the business and getting that cleaned up after a number of acquisitions in the last couple of years.
Yeah, same thing. we're being very cautious. We're cautiously optimistic, but we're being very cautious as we enter in the field with it. It can be, we're not using it to produce automation. We're doing it to collect data. We're using it to collect data. It's interesting to find out, from a human perspective, what we think the data is, and you go review on AI platform to see what is, quote, the stated response from AI. It's a very different approach. So it becomes more metric. There's no emotional or guidance. It's kind of like what I try to tell our team with SMS, email, text messaging. You're sending the messages across the board, but the person receiving that message is taken into the emotional state that they're in receiving it. You can't convey emotion in email, text, or SMS, and AI follows similarly that process. So we're using it for data collection to develop the automation on the back end, not using it to automate directly yet.
I don't know if it's even a question. I mean, whether we want to use it or not, it's happening. It's being delivered. Our customers are going to be using it or are already. So I think to echo what Pete and Neil said, I think that you have to be that. There are biases and there are issues with AI as it exists today that you have to be aware of, and it's only as good as the data that you give it. But I think Pete, you said it earlier, a level 1 tech using ChatGPT, it's there's really no way to prevent a lot of what's happening or what's coming, and so you have to figure out how to use it in a proper way and not get behind. So like I said, our industry is in its infancy, and I think just like security was a big topic a handful of years ago, and it was very new, and now it's, if you don't have security in your stacks, you're so far behind. I think it's going to be the same way with AI in the pretty near future here.
Yeah, AI has been very interesting in its ability to ingest and to try to make sense of large amounts of data, or to use it to synthesize. I think we're very cautious to put it in the line of decision making. So to do automated decision making is something that would be, we'd be very cautious to do, but it's a very helpful tool we found in the right hands, with the right guardrails to accelerate, the creation or analysis of data. Well, very good. So just a couple minutes. What would be one thing that you'd tell, an Axient partner just starting, or a prospective Axient partner, about how Axient's helped you automate BCDR and how that's impacted your business?
I think one of the things for me, and I know we didn't really get too deeply into it today, but when we start to look at bringing new solution partners into our tool stack, we're looking at what they've already done from an automation standpoint to either prevent the need for our team to have to try to do it and screw it up, or do something better than maybe what we're doing already. And a lot of what Axient has done with the data validation checking, a lot of the backup checking, and really the DR testing scenarios and auto verify have leapfrogged a lot of the stuff that we used to do that we had manually automated over the years, and it helped to just increase our confidence in that. So that was one of the bigger parts of Axient when we brought Axient to the table for us, was leapfrogging that automation around how to validate, verify backups, and do a lot of the DR testing and kind of go from there with it.
I would say, consistency. One of our biggest problems when we started was we were trying to meet the needs of everybody, and we wanted to appeal to everybody. So whatever they had, whatever they wanted, we take on and manage. So reduce the stack, reduce the number of vendors you're working with, eliminate the inconsistencies by going with one. We've chosen Axient for several different reasons. One is the consistency in the product line, what they've done, the continued development across all resources, not getting out of their zone per se. We see so many other vendors, they're in backup. Next thing you know, they're playing with network appliances, and bringing things in across the board well outside of the network stack. And so it creates a scope creep. I think it's that new shiny object syndrome. So the consistency for us has been really good. So cut the stack.
Yeah, I think Pete mentioned it, but some of the the auto verify and, you know, a lot of the automated remediation of common issues that we used to have to spend a lot of time manually checking and, you know, double checking and fixing ourselves has really been awesome because, you know, we've been able to continue to scale and have upwards of several hundred partners and not, you know, have more than a person or a person and a half working our backups. So to me, that's the ultimate success, which is that we don't have to have a massive team to manage, frankly, what's the most critical piece of the service we provide to our customers.
Excellent. Well, Neil, Stephen, Pete, thank you so much for being so transparent today. And we started by saying, hey, Microsoft is a huge org with tens of thousands of people, but you know, I admire MSPs because you actually have for your clients thousands or tens of thousands of people that you have to manage, and you do it with such a small staff, relatively speaking, to the number of people. And so I admire and kudos to the ingenuity, creativity, and persistence and change, rapid change. And so it's been fun learning from the three of you today, and thanks so much.